Thank you all for coming, and welcome to tonight's talk as part of the Wilderness Institute's annual lecture series. Tonight, our speaker is Gail Small, who will give the talk War Stories, American Indian Environmental Issues. Gail has traveled here from the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in southeast Montana, and we're very lucky to have her with us tonight. Gail will start by showing a clip from a movie, Homeland, that she was a part of and contributor to. She'll then talk for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll finish with time for questions. We ask you to please be concise and to the point with your questions and comments. Tonight, we're trying a new system in order for our radio and TV audience to catch the questions. There's a microphone right over here. Hopefully everyone sees it on your left-hand side of the room. And if you have a question or comment, please come up to the mic. And I hope this isn't intimidating, because we don't want to discourage any discussion, but this will help the recording capture the discussion that does go on. As usual, we'll finish about 8:30. Next week's speaker is Janine Pease, Director of Native American Studies and Vice President of American Indian Student Affairs at Rocky Mountain College. Please join us for her talk exploring Native American spirituality and wilderness. Full schedules of the series are, as usual, available by the back door. And tonight, we've asked Patrick Weaselhead to introduce our speaker. Patrick is director of the University of Montana's American Indian Student Services and a longtime friend of Gail's. Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's very much of a pleasure of mine to introduce a dear friend of mine. And on behalf of the Wilderness Institute and the 2006 Wilderness Issues Lecture Series, the Calvin B. Stotts Funds, Native American Studies, the University of Montana, State of Montana, the indigenous populations of the state, well, I can go on and on and on. But it's important that I would like to introduce Gail Small, who will talk about the war stories, American Indian environmental issues. Gail is currently the Executive Director of Native Action, housed at Lame Deer, Montana, where they still say Bus B. I've known Gail for some 30 years now and watched her grow from a freshman on campus in Montana who was scared of classes and was really kind of uptight at that time, to sharing the same campus at Eugene, Oregon, where she was working on her Juris Doctorate and I was working on my PhD, and it was so nice having compatriots and duck country. So they've never forgot us back there. Gail is a member of the Northern Cheyenne Indian tribe from Lame Deer and is a mother of 4 children. Her Cheyenne name is Head Chief Woman. She graduated in '78 with a BA degree in sociology from the University of Montana. She went on to earn a Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Oregon in 1982 and a certificate of completion in environmental and natural resource law. And I just recently learned that she was a heck of a supporter of Pat Williams and pushing for the agenda back in those days. And so political importance was being held back at the University of Montana Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Gail has several honors that I think we're very proud of in the state of Montana and in Indian country. And I'll mention just a few because this will go on and on and on. She was recognized in 1995 by Montana Magazine as one of Montana's most influential leaders in the past 25 years. And that's a feat that is unmatched in Indian country in a long time. With a team of Cheyenne leaders, Gail founded the Native Action as one of the first nonprofit organizations on Indian reservations. We who are friends of hers thought she was crazy in doing this, but to this day it's been one of the most political action committees and fighting for human rights, natural resources, a number of things. Gail has served as an elected member of the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council, and she still has a sense of humor, and she remains very active in national Indian policy issues and international indigenous issues. She taught at natural resource law and federal Indian law at the University of California in Humboldt, and 2 premier Montana tribal colleges, Chief Dull Knife College and Little Bighorn College in the eastern part of the state. Gail served as a guest lecturer and speaker at universities and before the congressional oversight hearings, one of the few American Indian females at that time. She was appointed and served 3 years on the Federal Reserve Board's Consumer Advisor Council. Gail was honored as Miss Magazine's 1995 Gloria Steinem Woman of Vision Award and a Territorial Resource Foundation 1997 Jeanette Rankin Award. So I present to you Gail, where early in life she was digging up turnips with her dad to live, and now she is digging up issues to help better American Indians in general and Northern Cheyenne specifically. Her ultimate goal is that she wants to see her grandkids be able to live their lives with clean air, water, on their land with their horses, and to be a part of the culture that is still alive. She is passionate, dedicated, and more than anything, she has a good heart. Please give a warm welcome to Gail Small. Thank you.
Good evening. It's good to get here. I really love Missoula. I went to school here for 4 years, and just every time I get back to Missoula, I just feel good. You're so lucky to live here and to be a part of the university. It's such a learning environment. And coming from southeastern Montana, it's very conservative, and Billings is a tough place to do work. And so when I come to Missoula, like when I flew in this morning from Billings, I'm here just a quick overnight trip. I had to get right back in the morning, but when I flew into Missoula, even though it was raining, my heart just lifted. Good experiences here, and good friends that are here. I want to acknowledge our Congressman Pat Williams, who's our guest tonight. I'm very honored that you came. He's done so much good work for Montana citizens and Indian tribes also. He was our champion for many, many issues, so I'm just so honored that he's here. And a lot of good friends are here. I see Jim Boggs up in the audience, who's worked with Northern Cheyenne since I was just out of college. He's been our expert witness on a number of environmental cases. So, over the years, this has kind of been Missoula's kind of like my home away from home when I need a break and just to get a resurge of strength and support. So it's good to be here. I'd like to, I just want to mention one thing. Pat Weaselhead, who introduced me, he just told me that there was 540 Indian students, 523 Indian students enrolled right now in the University of Montana, which is a record. It's unprecedented, the numbers of Indian students here. And a lot of that credit goes to the people who are in this room who did a lot of the, reaching out to the reservations, bringing them in. And I see Ray Cross here from the law school. He has a reputation that is bringing the Indian students into this university. So I want to give all of you, especially Pat, clap for bringing all these Indian students in. It's a lot of hard work. And for the students that are here, the Indian students that I see in the audience, big pat on the back too, because it's hard leaving home, very hard leaving home from the reservation and making an adjustment here. I know it was very hard for me my first year here, very difficult. And at that time, Henrietta Whiteman was the head of the India Studies program, and she took me under her wing and helped me get through the university. So you've had a long line of very accomplished, amazing Indian leadership here. So I want to start with this clip that just came out. It's been winning awards all over the country. And it, to the credit of the people who put this together, it's called Homeland, and we, I want to call special attention to the clip on our work. There was a woman that you'll see in there. Her name is Frida Standing Elk. She's an elderly Cheyenne woman who you'll see come on against an old log house, and she's the one that wanted to do this film. And she pushed us, and we all fought her because it took a lot of time and effort. They brought an entire film crew and like 20 people into our homes, and it was a lot of work putting it together. And during the time period that we were doing the film, Frida was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she ended up passing on prior to the film being released. So it's in her memory that we did this film and carry her memory on. You'll see her in the film. And it was pretty much an all-woman production, this film. The producers, the people who put the money up were women who wanted this message to get out about environmental justice. And the sister of the tribal president is on this film from the Passamaquoddy Reservation out of Northeast, and his wife, sister, is the one who really raised all the funding for this. It was very, a lot of work getting it on the air. And then they got it on PBS. And so I think we've been able to get the message out there that there's some very critical environmental justice issues confronting us in Indian country. And they're not overnight. They've been brewing and simmering and occurring, and the political clout that it's going to take to remedy them is going to take all of us as a people to work on those remedies. And a lot of it's going to be technology. We need to come up with new technology, better technology to get the minerals. If the federal government, under this administration, the Bush administration, the Cheney administration, is, rapidly taking out the public's resources. If that's going to occur, then we need to look very quickly at technology so that our water is going to stay in the ground, for example, that our rivers are going to be able to sustain a varied environment. So those are the challenges that are facing not just Indian tribes, although this video is clearly about the tribes from Alaska to the Dene, with uranium development big, booming down in Navajo land, to the pollution of the pulp mills in northeastern northeastern United States, and then ANWR, the whole struggle to get the oil and the pipeline built down from Alaska. So I would like to it's only about a quick 15-minute clip, so I asked that if we could turn that on now. I've always known that this is the place I was meant to be. This is my source of strength here. Land that I live on today with my 4 kids, it's my mother's family's land, and her family are, they're buried right behind us here in the hills. The Cheyenne themselves are about 8,000 tribal members. We live on about 500,000 acres of land here in southeastern Montana. The land is tied to the culture, to the language, to the viewpoint. So there's a tremendous spiritual connection to our homeland that is the core of the fight here. All my life, my people have been fighting to keep strip mining off our reservation. Right now, our tribal lands are surrounded by Montana's largest power plant, 5 massive strip mines, and the largest coal-fired generating complex in the country. When the Bush administration came into office in 2000, Vice President Dick Cheney held a series of closed-door meetings to shape this nation's energy policy. This country will never know exactly what went on in those meetings with energy lobbyists, but what happened to us was this. The Tongue River Valley, where we live, was opened up to massive development.
From the Gulf of Mexico to the far reaches of Alaska, the Bush administration plans to step up drilling for oil and natural gas, even in some of America's most untouched spots.
They're basically coming in and sizing up what's left in the United States. And it's like whatever they can take, they're trying to take. They're streamlining, gutting, whatever laws are out there. It's kind of like the gold rush days, It's like there's a rush to get Indian energy resources.
So today, Indian country These last slivers of land are the places where there is still oil, where there is still natural gas, where there is still coal methane, where there is still pockets of uranium, where there are still forests, where there is still water. That is the frontier that is left because it has not yet been exploited.
What they want right now is not so much coal, it's natural gas. Really, it's methane. It's coal bed methane gas in our area of the Potter River Basin. But natural gas makes it sound like it's so nice.
Coal bed methane gas is the primary constituent of natural gas that you burn in your homes or in your business. They drill down into the coal seam, which is where both the coal bed methane water and coal bed methane gas resides. And then another smaller pipe with an electric pump on it pumps a combination of gas and water to the surface. Production, particularly in the Potter River Basin, is associated with lots and lots of saline water. Those wells will produce something like 6 billion barrels of water. The easiest and cheapest thing to do with that produced water is to dump it. And the impacts associated with discharging huge volumes of produced coal bed methane water are just staggering.
The primary component of household cleaners is sodium. And the reason why it works is because it causes the soil particles to essentially come apart. And so water that's high in sodium causes that same thing to happen. It causes the soil particles to come apart. Once that happens, the soil can no longer take water in, and you lose the ability to use it for agricultural production.
The technology exists today to re-inject the salty water back into the methane wells, but it would cost the companies money.
The money is there to do this thing right, and it needs to be done right so that everyone else is not damaged for the benefit of the producers.
It's outrageous that these energy companies would be allowed to dump the wastewater, the salty water, and they're dumping it as we speak.
The plan now is to surround our reservation with 75,000 methane gas wells. These wells will drain our groundwater and turn our homeland into a desert.
I think the water's alive, it's moving. With water here, we're going to live forever. And as long as the river flows, the grass grows, you always have a homeland. Once it's destroyed, I don't know what's going to become of us.
This is our land. We were born and raised here. And we are part of this land, part of this earth. We would go with my grandmother to pick cherries and buffalo berries. And when we approach the trees, my grandmother would say, she would stand there and actually talk to the trees and say, we're going to pick you. We're not here to abuse you. We are very closely connected with this earth, and we have to respect it and treat it like it's our very own mother.
This isn't the first time that we've been up against the energy giants. The Cheyenne Reservation, carved from land once considered too barren for farming or ranching, ironically turns out to sit atop one of the largest deposits of clean burning coal in the world. Deposits estimated to be worth over $200 billion. I remember when I was starting high school, the big companies came in here wanting to get their hands on our coal. That's 30 years ago, the coal wars.
During the energy crisis of oil embargoes, the big thrust was to use Wyoming and Montana and those vast coal reserves to fuel the nation.
America's energy demands now outstrip our energy supply.
200 million people each burning 3 gallons of fuel every day. Gasoline stations closed down
What is
all across the
needed
state.
now is decisive and responsible action to increase our energy supplies.
The term that was used in Montana really was, you're looking to us to be a national sacrifice area. That is, we're going to have all of the impacts to light the cities in Seattle and so forth.
Who gets sacrificed? What gets sacrificed? You want to give up your gas? I don't want to give up mine. Why should I?
At the time, we had a tribal council that had a very limited understanding of the English language, and they really didn't comprehend that the coal companies were going to come in and develop the coal. You know, what was always told them is that they were going to come in and explore and find out how much energy resources we had. This was all kind of pushed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The BIA came in and they sent their specialists in and they told the tribe this was a real good deal.
The Northern Cheyenne Reservation spreads across 437,000 acres. Over half of that land is committed to exploration by the coal companies.
The lure that was used in that first initial approach was money. Certainly our people here are in need of money.
It was economic blackmail. Our tribe was so poor, we didn't even have running water in our houses. Even today, the average income here is only around $10,000.
Every Indian reservation in this country, the least electrified, the least spent on health, the least spent on education, the least spent on infrastructure, you know. And so tribes are desperate to find some way to generate income for their communities.
So the companies were going to come in and we all had this little like standoff with them where we wouldn't allow them to cross into our homeland. And so the tribal council decided that they were going to have to sue the companies to break the contract. Otherwise, there would probably be violence and our young people here would get hurt. What began was a very long fight. It went through all during my high school years. The coal wars were very personal. All us Cheyenne kids were bused 25 miles off the reservation to Coal Strip, to the same school as kids whose parents worked for the coal companies. They would call us prairie niggers, that we were anti-everything, you know, like we were anti-progress, our tribe. So I quit school when I was about, I think I was a junior. I just couldn't endure the harassment we were getting from the non-Indians down there because of our tribe's stand against mining and protecting our land. So a lot of us quit high school. So when a lot of us left for college, it was even harder. Very few of us got through. I think my class was only about 3 of us Indian students that got through. And then came home, and the coal wars were still getting hotter and more heated. At 21, I was the youngest member of the tribal negotiating committee, working to get the coal leases canceled, and I was the only one with a college degree. It was a long, hard road. It took 15 years, but we finally won. In the 1980s, the courts ordered in our favor, and all the leases on our lands were canceled. And it kind of gave us sustenance internally to keep going, that maybe there was some hope in the American court system. It also gave me hope that this was the best way I could help my people. I went to law school, and I returned to the reservation in 1984 to form a nonprofit organization.
Okay, we're coming up to my office, which is Native Action. We just got that today. My dad was laughing. He said the Pony Express was pretty heavy today. But we need more file cabinets, don't we, Dad? We're down to using orange boxes now. It's a very small, flexible organization, and reluctantly we get involved in some litigation. But our main focus is to create the information for the people to be able to grasp, and then for them to speak their own voice. The people here could all be millionaires if they would sign on the dotted line and go into a major energy contract. But they vote, and they've chosen to say no. For 30-some years they voted and said no. Now that to me is almost like a miracle. I mean, you look at any other people in the world who have been given this abundance of wealth and for over 30-some years have said no. It's really a story that I find no analogy to.
Our values come from our ancestors. They give us the strength to fight for this last small island of land that we live on today. In the summer of 1876, the Cheyenne joined with the Sioux and the Arapaho for one last stab at freedom in what would become known as the Battle of the Little Bighorn. After the Custer Battle, we were marched to Oklahoma as prisoners of war. Hundreds of our people died of disease and starvation. The Cheyenne decided they would rather die fighting. They told the military that they are returning to their beloved North Country, and they asked if they could get a little ways north before they made the ground bloody. They were relentlessly pursued as they made their brutal trek back to the Powder River Basin, hundreds of miles on foot. Only 300 Cheyenne people survived, but finally, we were granted a small reservation here along the Tongue River.
It almost makes you cry what our people went through, endured for me to be living here today, for me to be raising my kids here. It's a very heroic tale of the strength and courage of the Cheyenne people. It's very powerful to have that kind of history. And it's not something you just sign away on a piece of paper and say, well, make me a millionaire tomorrow then, and I'll give up all this land and this history. It's not the Cheyenne way to do that. Oh, here's flour, Dad. I've got flour here. My dad has a reputation for making the best gravy. Very grateful that my parents are both here, my mother and my dad, and support all of our work and give us kids a lot of direction. And youngest son, Joaquin, here, grateful that he's kind of supports a lot of our work too. So with that, I'd like to ask my mom to say a prayer.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come.
Recently, the Bureau of Land Management started approving COVID methane leases right on the borders of our reservation without even consulting our tribe. So we filed a lawsuit against them.
Where we sit, our hands are tied, everything's been done. We've been raped and we didn't even know it, you know. What can we do? You know, we can't close our legs.
This has been going on for a long time. I don't know what to say to you.
You forced the tribe's hand. You know, you've made us very angry. The wells are already going in. You're coming in now, but you've already done everything.
We have to establish some type of protocol where we don't have to worry about when we approve a project, it's going to go into some kind of litigation. And that's why we're here today.
Protocol means trust and respect. And you haven't showed that you trust or respect us by even reaching out to us before you start approving all these wells and drilling them. And you come in here at the last minute because the tribe sued you. So you assure us that you're not going to let no more wells come in up there. You're not going to dump no more water into our river. Hold up everything till we work out an agreement here. Protect our culture. Otherwise, you're wasting our time. The federal government is supposed to assist Indian tribes in protecting our interests so that we have a homeland in perpetuity. That's what a federal trustee is supposed to do. And instead, we've been forced to suing them. You know what limited money we have is spent suing them, our trustee.
And our ancestors didn't walk back here for nothing. And like I said to them, you know, maybe if you walk back too, you would see it from a different standpoint of view.
But we're fighting back pretty good.
Yeah.
Overall.
Overwhelming odds.
Yeah. Overwhelming odds, yeah.
Every day, a woman like Gail Small or these communities wake up and they wonder who is coming after them today. You know, you go to sleep, you win, and you wake up the next morning and the Bush administration has leased something else, or some new evil is coming towards your, you know, community. And they call this. One of my friends, she's a psychologist and social worker for Indian communities. She calls it ethno-stress. You wake up in the morning, you're still Indian.
The Cold Wars go on. But one victory we all celebrate is that we now have a high school on our reservation. The kids were tired of being called prairie niggers, just like I was when I was a kid.
So like I go to the games and then that's when I feel like real proud that, you know, hey, I was a little part of this and doing this high school. We are proud that we are Cheyenne and that we still live in our indigenous land. And that sustains us. It'll sustain our children and their children. Genocide is the destruction of a people and their culture. And unless we face up to the fact that destruction of these tribes is at a point where, you know, they may not be able to survive much longer. We are at that point here. You put in 75,000 methane gas wells around our reservation. You take our groundwater, pollute our air, destroy our rivers. The Cheyenne here will probably not be able to survive. We'll have a wasteland here. That's what's at stake here. Where will the Cheyenne go?
That was our tribal president, our previous tribal president, Cowboy Fisher, in there, the big cowboy guy with the hat on the river there. He lives right along the river. And when we previewed this, and at the end there, when I said, "Where will the Cheyenne go?" he said, "We ain't going nowhere." And you know, the work that I do is reflected a lot in the film. I also do a lot of other work as well. Native Action is a small nonprofit organization, but we work really well with all the tribal colleges in Montana. There's 7 tribal colleges across the state. And one big project that we got moving forward right now is trying to help tribes develop more common ground with other Montana citizens, trying to identify issues of similar concern so that we can work together to make progress. And in our area, I think, you know, we're seeing it where it's taken us probably 30 years to forge strong relationships with a lot of the non-Indian ranchers in our area who depend on this river, the Tongue River, for their ranches, their irrigation. And now their children, many of whom have gone to school here at the university, but their children are like my age, and we've developed kind of like intergenerational support. So through the help of these ranching organizations like the Northern Plains Resource Council, many of you have heard of it in Billings, you know, we've been able to kind of collaborate and pull our limited resources together. And, you know, the ranchers aren't rich either. You know, they have, if the cattle market's good, they have a little more money in the fall, and then they'll put money into like the challenges that we're involved in. The legal challenges are very costly. The expert witnesses that are needed are hard to get, and oftentimes we can't afford them. And, you know, like the whole issue of wilderness, which this institute is about, is very critical in this film, although we didn't get to address it. You know, the migratory routes of all the big game animals is right through these coal bed methane fields. And even now with all the methane gas development in Wyoming, which is just up the river from us, the headwaters of the Tongue River is actually in Wyoming. And it comes down like around Sheridan, the Bighorn Mountains, into Decker and through our reservation. But the headwaters is up there in Wyoming. So we're already dealing with, you know, like all of the methane gas development. The boom in Wyoming is just tremendous. If you have never been to Sheridan in that area, you'd never recognize it today. And like what you've seen on the film with a lot of the alkali through the tributaries, it's just, you can just see the white alkali coming down from the tributaries, and the ponds that they're putting the coal bed methane water into aren't even lined, they're unlined ponds. That the saline is going right into the ground, into our groundwater. It's really, if you go see it, it'll just blow your mind. I see Grant came in up there, I think, and he used to work in the Potter River Basin Resource Council, so he knows what I'm talking about. But the whole area of that is just being transformed into really a desolate wasteland. But you know, the ranching organizations and us, we've been successful in really slowing things down. We're before the Ninth Circuit. We're awaiting a decision right now on a challenge to the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, for the entire state of Montana. They call it a statewide EIS, and it's just outrageous. Conrad Burns, our senator in Montana, he was able to raise over $3 million in congressional appropriations to the BLM to do this EIS. $3 million they put into this EIS. And our tribe is the closest government to this boom. We're the largest population base, and we pushed so hard to get some of that money, we could barely get $150,000. That's all we could get out of this $3 million appropriation that the federal government put into this environmental impact statement. They wanted us to sign on as partners as a result of us getting that $150,000, and we refused to, because we knew that it was going to be an inadequate EIS and that we would inevitably have to challenge it in order to deal with the issues that, you know, we care about. So we ended up challenging it with $150,000 against $3 million. This is the kind of odds we're always up against. It's just outrageous. And the political might of this administration, the Cheney administration. Cheney's from Wyoming. folks don't know that. He's from Wyoming, and they're just pushing this through as fast as they can. But we've been successful in getting to the Ninth Circuit. We, I think it was September, October, we had oral argument. We're awaiting the decision. But meanwhile, we've been able to slow them down, which is almost like a miracle. And I really believe that collaborating with these non-Indian ranchers like Northern Plains Resource Council, the non-Indian ranching groups in Wyoming, we've been able to pool our resources and be very strategic. Like, can you come up with a wildlife biologist and pay for that? Can you come up with a soil specialist? Can the Cheyenne do this? And so we've been able to kind of build this support base. But again, it's like a David and Goliath fight. I was visiting with a lot of the hunters on my reservation. My brothers are, I have 4 brothers, and my brothers are hunters, and my mother is, she's like renowned. She's she dries the meat on our reservation for a lot of people, and I was asking her, we did, as part of our research, we did a subsistence survey as to how many people on our reservation are dependent upon wild game, or the turnips, that we dig from the ground, the berries, or the birds. We did a subsistence survey, and it was a real quick and dirty survey, as we said, just to get it into the record during this EIS. And we found that as a result of the survey, it was 97% of all Cheyennes are a subsistence-based people. We depend on the wild game, or the plants, the roots, the berries for our daily sustenance. And I interviewed my mother, and I was shocked that she had dried 40 deer that year. Can you imagine? She works full-time, too, at the Lame Deer School. She's a bilingual teacher. She's really fluent in our old language. And I was just amazed. She dried 40 deer. That's how dependent we are on the wildlife in this area. So I was visiting with a lot of the hunters and the gatherers and doing the survey, and the hunters were telling me that with the methane wells coming in Wyoming already, and in the Decker, Montana area, that the pipelines, they had these huge compressor stations that are very big, and they almost like I've been to a tour with the Montana State Board of Oil and Gas on the methane fields in Decker. And you literally stand there in the compressor stations and the whole ground shakes. You're just shaking. That's how loud they are, and it vibrates, I'm sure, clear out into the land. But as a result, the wild game are getting mixed up. They don't want to come through those areas now. And so like my brothers and their friends were telling me that we're having elk in places that they shouldn't be, that they're getting confused because they come down from the Bighorn Mountains, which is above our reservation. They come down through our reservation, the Crow Reservation, that they cross the Tongue River and they go into the Custer National Forest. And so like the big game habitat is all being impacted. And so the migratory routes are all confused now. We've got wild game not knowing, they're being displaced. And then I did a survey with some of the cultural leaders of my tribe, and I never knew that beaver were so significant. I mean, a lot of this work I do, I learn a lot as I go. And one of the Sundance leaders of my tribe was telling us that he was out getting the beaver for these ceremonies. He said, and it just broke his heart. He said, the beaver were all dead along the river. He said, I don't know what's wrong. He said, they're saying that it's the salt that's in the water. He said, I went to get the beaver for the ceremony. He said, and they were all floating and dead along the river. He said, you have to help me figure out what's going on. He said, because I got enough for this year. He said, but if I don't get them for next Sundance, we only have one Sundance a year in Northern Cheyenne. He said, I don't know what we're going to do. So, I mean, it's really impacting not only like our environment, but our way of life. Because, we depend on the wild game for not only food, but we also depend on it to carry on our ceremonies. So, there's a lot at stake with what we're confronting in this area. So we're hoping that, the Ninth Circuit rules in our favor, and we pray, we're strong believers in prayer and faith. And we work real hard to try to get political power, because we realize we're not naive. We know that you have to organize and work the Indian vote so that we can elect people who understand our concerns and will support our issues. Where I think the tribes are very alarmed of the manipulation that we're seeing in the court systems right now, because it's really been our only remedy for many, many years, is the federal court systems and also the state system. And Montana's been fair to us in recent years as a result really of getting out the Indian vote. But I was really surprised when the Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor retired. And we were hoping that another woman would be appointed to the Supreme Court, and that didn't happen. And I guess, I was sitting around visiting with some of my friends back in our area, Billings area, and we're like, there wasn't even much of an outcry from the American feminist movement that they didn't appoint another woman to the Supreme Court of the United States. And so that you look at what's happening in our country, and it's almost like we're being afraid to speak out. We're being afraid to organize. A lot of our people are, they don't even like to use the email, the internet anymore. They're afraid that, whatever is going through the internet can be accessed. I have a friend who's a lawyer who helped us a lot on the high school case. He won't even use the fax machine. I mean, you look at, like George Orwell's, that book about, what's happening with Big Brother. It's like it's almost occurring now. We're being almost like a chilling effect on our right to speak out and our freedom to even think and to question what's happening in this country. But I really think that we have to come together, and the university students, there's a need for you to organize. I grew up in the high school and the college of the 70s, and my sister Wanda was in the 60s, and so we kind of grew up in a time when there was a lot of activism, and we accomplished a lot. And you look at what is happening in our country now, where they've gutted all these, Environmental Protection Act, the Endangered Species Act. I could go on all night long on these major environmental laws. These are the laws that, are fundamental to protecting public lands. And these public lands they're not the energy companies' lands. They belong to you and me, and they belong to our children's children. There's a thing called the public trust doctrine that I was visiting earlier with Robin about, that you're supposed to manage these public resources for the future, the public's trust in the future. What is going to be the need for these public lands in the future? Do you want your children's children to have parks, forests? What is it that you value is I do a lot of reading, and I always really believe the early naturalists or environmentalists when they say that there is a need to be alone in the forest, that every human being has that need to have wilderness. And that's in jeopardy right now. I'm working real hard right now on a project involving the potential opening of the Custer Forest to coal bed methane gas development, which will completely surround us. And the Custer Forest is like in Ashland. It's right off the Tongue River, and it's off the little border town of Ashland. And they're doing their 10-year management plan, and they're directed to begin looking at coal bed methane leasing in the forest. And this is like the last stronghold for our big game. And in all of our plants, we still gather plants there. So I was able to get a small grant, and Jim Boggs is helping me on it. And we're trying to document how the Cheyennes have used the forest over all these years so we can begin doing baseline analysis, documenting, we have people buried there in the forest. This used to be Cheyenne land before the Custer Forest was, created. This was where our people lived. We have people buried there. And we have areas where our people homesteaded. We still have major gathering sites there, plant sites, and it's the area where all of our tribe's most, powerful spiritual medicine people got their medicine from. Very powerful land. And so we're working with a lot of elders trying to document that, and it's really frightening if they begin moving into the Custer Forest at what's going to be in jeopardy there. So, from my standpoint, we live life in this constant crisis, constant, like my friend Winona LeDuc says, ethno stress. You may win a court case, and tomorrow, my God, what else is coming, In the midst, you're a mother. I'm a mother of 4 kids. You're a daughter. Like I said, my parents are still alive, knock on wood, and give us a lot of guidance. I'm one of 10 kids, and so I'm also a sister. I take all of those responsibilities and try to carry out our role. But, for a lot of these tribes, I think that, we're very close to losing what we may never be able to get back. And so we need your help, clearly. I've always been one to tell my tribe, we need to ask for help. And let's not be, too embarrassed or too ashamed. Humble ourselves and ask for help. And sometimes we've gotten it, like when the coal boom was on, I was just out of the University of Montana, and I had gone home as a tribal sociologist. And Alan Rowland was our tribal president. He was a major force. And I was his assistant, and I was learning. And I told him at the time, I said, well, let's write letters, Chuggy, we called him Chuggy, to like the Sierra Club and all these environmental groups. I'm sure they'll come help us, because there's so much at stake here. And the coal boom was hitting, and he sat me down, he said, go ahead, write those letters, I'll sign them. So I did, let's write letters and try to get contacts. We didn't get a single dollar or help during that time. And I remember I came in one day, and he asked me if I had ever gotten any responses, and I said no, but I was going to do follow-up phone calls. And he said, sit down, Gail. So I sat down, and he said, I'm going to tell you something. He said, you're going to find, he said, the work that we do, he said that we're out here in southeastern Montana, we're kind of all alone out here. We're very isolated. He said, and that the Cheyenne have very few allies. He says, so, what was his point? He said, so remember that when you start like being strategic, he was saying. Remember that and work from that concept that we have very few allies. And so I remember walking out of there feeling like, geez, I gotta wake up here and quit being so naive. But I've always, continued my enthusiasm and my efforts to reach out for help, because I really believe that it's not to just our benefit that we have a Custer National Forest. It's just not to the Cheyenne people's benefit that we have the Tongue River flowing, that it's a river that's alive. It's to everyone's benefit that we maintain these things that are important to us. And whether you're from the East Coast or from the West, or from Montana, I think that all human beings have a need for wilderness, and that we really need to step up to the plate here as human beings, because so much is at jeopardy. And this election coming up in 2006 is a very critical election. We have Senator Burns up for election this year. And it's been very difficult trying to get protection of the Tongue River. Right now, we're almost being blackmailed. We petitioned the Environmental Protection Agency to have our own tribal water quality standards, very similar to Flathead. Flathead have their own water quality standards. I think there's 5 tribes in the country. But we're empowered to have them through the Clean Water Act. It's a federal law. Indian tribes can enact their own water quality standards. So they made us go through 4 years of hoops, which we've done. We've had hearings from Billings to Sheridan on how many hearings we've gone through. We've made all these changes. We've done everything. Pretty much very similar case to when the Cheyenne petitioned for Class 1 air quality pursuant to the Federal Clean Air Act. Tribes, again, are empowered to do that, to protect their air. So we're doing that with our water. Hey, we've been totally held up. And now they're saying because it's an issue of national concern, there's no legal definition of what is an issue of national concern. Just the fact that we may possibly hold up the methane energy industry and that there's an energy crisis, that we're in war in Iraq, that they have to give us no rationale for that definition, but they've effectively held up Northern Cheyenne having water quality standards that will protect the Tongue River where it flows through our reservation. And this is 4 years now that they've held us up. So I really believe that political clout is the only remedy where the Cheyenne will ever be able to regulate the river. And it's probably not going to happen during this administration. So in the meantime, we have to continue doing what we're doing, working with the non-Indian ranchers and those support groups that we can, and hoping, that tomorrow will be a better day. I'll take some questions now.
Thank you, Gail. Just a reminder that if you don't mind coming up and using the microphone for questions, that would be great. And please don't be shy. We'd love to hear from folks. If you're really opposed to the microphone, you can talk from where you are.
I think I remember that prior to this last election, Brian Schweitzer sort of touted himself as a friend of the tribes. And now that he's in office, he's really pushing for what he calls clean coal development in Montana. How does his push for this coal development potentially affect the Northern Cheyenne Reservation? Has he been talking to the tribes about how this can happen in a way that works for them?
To this governor's credit, he has appointed more Indians than we've ever had in state government. We've never seen the depth of his commitment in that respect, getting Indian people appointed to his cabinet, actually reaching out to tribes. And this whole, his push for Sin Fields really is above our reservation, going up into eastern Montana. That's where the big push is up there. The COVID methane industry, that issue within this administration really comes under the Board of Environmental Review. And that board, there was just a hearing about 2 weeks ago. And Northern Plains Resource Council had a real strong proposal before. It's called Doing It Right. You can get on the internet and go to that Board of Environmental Review. There's a lot of information on there on it. But that board has withheld granting that those rules, and they've asked. They didn't say no to it. They said come back in the fall when we get our scientific. Again, we need expert witnesses, to get our science better organized so we can present it to them. But it was a huge crowd that went up there for the hearing. I guess half the crowd there was the ranchers, pushing that issue, and of course the other half was, all the energy companies that are there. So I think, to answer your point, I'm not trying to avoid it. I'm not that familiar with what he's pushing. I haven't really, I'm so busy caught up in this COVID methane stuff, and then now I'm moving into this forest issue. And there's a couple other issues I'm trying to organize on getting out the Indian vote on the side here, I haven't really studied that issue in depth because, again, it's so far up north from us.
Did you endorse anybody to run against Bert?
No, I can't do that because we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan. Any other questions?
Gail, I heard you mention the tribe writing its own statement about air quality and its own statement about water quality. Several jurisdictions in Montana have taken advantage of the ability to write a charter and which says, basically gives the authority to make your own rules, to have your own, of course, comprehensive plan, to make statements about where we'll be 50 or 100 years from now. To your knowledge, do any of the Montana tribes have the sort of charter which supports not just the notions of sovereignty, but actually drafting their own documents that on just tribal initiative that help in a vision and enforce a vision?
You know, every tribe has a number, you know, we're governments, like county governments, state governments, all these, you know, governments. We're very similar to kind of like, we're like a nation within a nation. So we have tribal constitutions. We have tribal courts. We have every time a tribal government goes through an election, they come up with like their own plan of action. It's kind of like, usually like a 5 to 10 year strategic plan. And then that plan pretty much has their vision and it kind of addresses their priorities. What are the priorities for this particular administration? And then we also have planning documents, a lot of planning documents. These tribal governments are actually very sophisticated. You know, a lot of folks don't realize that how sophisticated our governments have become, and we have lawyers as our tribal court judges. We have many people on our tribal councils now with college degrees. And you know, what we really lack, I think, is in many respects is like, you know, we don't have the, how would I say it? We're young governments in this country. These tribal constitutions that we govern ourselves under came about in 1934. That's a very young time for your government to adapt to that way of governance. Prior to that, many tribes had their own traditional form of government. Like in my tribe, we have a council of chiefs with military societies. That's how our government ran itself, and it still does manage itself to a great degree. I mean, even today, you know, you'll hear many Cheyennes, you know, at our hearings will come up, like at the environmental hearings. I remember in Lame Deer, one young man stood up and he said that he identified himself as a dog soldier, which he is. He's a member of the Dog Soldier Military Society, and they're like our suicide warriors. And so he stood up and he told the methane companies, I'm a dog soldier. He said, and what you're planning to do will never happen. And, you know, we all knew what he was, you know, but, you know, it's like those societies that police our people internally, our chief society, they're still existing. And then you put on that, like the 1934 Constitution, where we have to govern ourselves under 3 branches of power. You know, it's still young. And it's going to take a while, I think, before we, you know, figure out that right balance, if that right balance is there. But as a result of a lot of young people coming home, we've created the necessary planning documents, and visioning is definitely a part of it. Patrick?
Gail, what's the status of the Tongue River Railroad and maybe the Otter Creek?
You know, that's been a very, I wish I had time to write about that. That's just been the craziest mixed bag I've ever seen. You know, the man who's been proposed on the Tongue River Railroad and that whole Montco mine development has been on this crusade to develop that coal in that area for about 50 years now, 40, 50 years. And he manages to find investors to do this. And he has the political wherewithal within, you know, the administration to move that forward. And when President Clinton was in power at the time, and he came in, and there was a move, remember, to open up Yellowstone Park, the headwaters above Yellowstone Park, for gold mining. That was the Crown Butte exchange. And as an exchange for that, the federal government gave the state of Montana 550 million tons of federal coal, and gave it to the state of Montana in return for what, you know, clearly were not quantifiable economic losses, but that was the argument that was put forth in the midnight hour. You know how these things get through. That certainly does. But it went through, and Cheyennes were up in arms. Totally, I've never seen people so angry in many, many years. And our tribal vice president drove all night to Helena to deal with that issue and threatening to kick the door in, and it was just a wild time. But you know, the fact that they didn't consult us and gave the state of Montana 550 million tons of federal coal on our border, you know, we're just systematically ignored. That really got the tribe angry. And so then they brought a lawsuit. Every time you turn around, there's a lawsuit. And then we ended up trying to go into a settlement agreement with the state of Montana. It was a very tough negotiating session with the state land board. It was the Montana State Land Board at the time. Judy Martz was the governor at the time. And the tribe proposed an agreement, a settlement agreement. It was very similar to what's happening at Coal Strip, that they would protect our air quality, protect our water quality, protect, what our issues are. In return, we would allow them to begin the mining. And there were also a number of other things in the agreement. So it went to a vote before the state land board. It was a huge, raucous meeting, and no one supported the Cheyenne but us. Not a single person testified in support of us. I was just amazed again. And the energy company was there in full arms, and one guy got up and he said, "You pass this agreement and big money won't come in." I remember him saying that. The state land board split totally on partisan lines, and they voted to support our negotiated settlement. And then it was supposed to be introduced into Congress. And part of the deal on when it got to Congress was that Baucus said he would support it. Burns wouldn't support it. It's never been introduced into Congress because there's a split between Burns and Baucus on the Otter Creek settlement. But you look at the Cheyenne, how hard we fought. How it started out such an ugly case, giving up 550 million tons of coal for what was, nebulous economic impact losses. Never being consulted. We try to go into a settlement agreement. In good heart, we go to the state land board. We have a, very intense hearing. The vote finally comes down barely in our favor. Martz was furious that day. I remember Secretary Bob Brown was there against it, and it was just a real tough decision. And then they shut it down in Congress. It's like my tribe was saying, what's the point? The state's word is no good. The state land board agreed to support us, and now they've reneged. Their word is no good. And that's what they say in our language in our council meetings. So in essence, that's it.
You called the organization as help. I was wondering what you would like to see specifically from the rest of Montana and that community.
From the environmental community?
Just from the Montana community in general.
I would like to see the Montana legislature work together more. I have a lot of my friends, my really close girlfriends that I've known for years, like Carol Juneau and Norma Bixby, my cousin Veronica Small Eastman. We've elected these women leaders from our reservations to the state legislature. This took 20 years of legal fighting to get them elected. We had to bring a Federal Voting Rights Act lawsuit to get our reservations. They were gerrymandered up. And there was so much racial polarization, we couldn't get any of our people elected. So that took a Federal Voting Rights Act lawsuit, and I remember I was a witness in that. Janine Pease led the charge, her and Norma, and we went through almost 2 months of federal trial to win the right to redraw the lines on our state of Montana so the Indians could be elected. So we go through all this work for 20 years, litigation, elections, you name it. Getting Janine appointed to the Apportionment Commission. I mean, everything we just like good little troops, we just do it. We just keep jumping through the hoops, trying to get something good done. And they get up there, and these women's legislation never gets passed hardly. I mean, I went up there a couple years ago, and I was there for something on another issue. I think it was that Otter Creek deal, that state land board. And they were having a burial ceremony. They were in the rotunda of the state capitol, and they had all these tombstones all around these Indian women. Walked in on it, and they were having a press conference. On all those tombstones was all their legislation, like House Bill 100 or whatever, that hadn't been defeated. All their legislation hadn't gone through. And they were so upset, and it was like, how can we reach out to Montana, the other citizens in the state legislature to work with us? The Women's Caucus, even I went to a Women's Caucus meeting there, and you would think that the Feminist Caucus would support these, dynamic Indian women leaders. They weren't supporting them. So that's what I really wish, is that, there would be some quid pro quo. We give some, we like a little bit back, we'd like a little support on some of our initiatives. You know, like the Indian Education for All Act. You know, it was championed by Carol Juneau. And that was so disheartening to see the fight when it came to the appropriations. How much money were the Indians going to get? Do we really need to teach Indian education? I mean, that discussion should not have been there when we have a constitutional mandate in the state of Montana to do that. But it's just like, you know what I'm saying? Is even if it's in your constitution, it's like what is it, 2004 when they finally got it through. Should never take that long. So I want alliances, you know, like we need allies. We need people that are elected to work with us, because what benefits us is going to benefit you. It's like we're all Montana residents. You know, we need to work together more. And when you vote for people, tell them that. You know, I'm going to vote for you, but try to work with, you know, people beyond your narrow focus. You know, there's 9 Indians going to be in the state legislature this year. Try to work with them. Let's appoint a few more. You know, I've been trying to get these Indian ranchers on these trade commissions that go to Japan and all over the country that are always being appointed by the governor. You know, we raise so much organic Indian beef in Montana on our reservations. These Indian ranchers get pennies, and they want to get into the international market. But we have not been able to get a single rancher appointed to any of these trade commissions. But that's a big issue, and that would really help us. That would help us grow our economy on the reservations. We'd get more Indian ranchers in, because we own a lot of land that we need to use. But it's an alternative economy that we need help on. We need Indians appointed to a lot of these seats, you know. The Board of Regents, we should have an Indian on there. You know, why is it that we just always get an Indian on the parole board? I mean, give me a break. You know, we have brains in other areas too.
Yeah, speaking of the coal, have you seen an increased level of methylmercury contamination in the fish?
I don't even know the answer to that. You know, we've been struggling just to get a fish biologist to come in out there.
I mean, in tests, do you know if there's been any EPA advisories on consumption?
I'm not sure. There's a process going on now, that TMDL process, where they do that total dissolved, you know, the mineral content in the standard setting right now. That's going on. But we don't have a fish and wildlife biologist on the reservation. So we're really, like I say, we're really in need, and it's always like struggling to, you know, like Bauer that came on, the soil specialist, he did most of his work free for us. That's how we were able to utilize his resources. He was great. Any other questions? If not, then thank you. Oh,
I have a quick question.
Okay.
Yeah. Just following up on your comment about allies, and I know that Patrick, when he introduced you, mentioned some of your work nationally and internationally. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit, I mean, just hearing your story of the struggle that you face on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, I can't imagine how you even begin to try to work beyond the reservation borders, yet I also hear you saying that's really important. So I don't know if you could speak to some of the work you do nationally and internationally, and then also just sort of why you choose to do that work as well.
You know, I think we have to have a global perspective, and our tribe really believes that. I was thinking earlier about Austin Tumu Sr., and when I was kind of collecting my thoughts. You know, he was the one that really pushed my thinking to do this international work, this kind of like having this global view. And I remember he said that he was always putting on these peace gatherings, international peace gatherings. This was, you know, years ago. And he was a man so far ahead of his time in his thinking. And I remember I used to always go up and help him. We'd cook, I can't remember how many buffalo the tribe would donate. And for everybody, there'd be huge international peace gatherings at his ranch on the Rosebud. And he told me that one time, he said, you know, the Cheyenne, Gail, he said, the Cheyenne defeated the United States in military battle. Don't you ever forget that. And he said, not many people can say that. The Cheyenne defeated the U.S. in military battle. And he said, when you win a battle, he said, war does not bring peace. Since we defeated the United States in that Custer battle, he said, our war has never let up. He said, we're under attack here. He said, but I'm going to tell you that we all, as human beings, he said, have to find peace. He said, war does not bring peace. And he said, and we were talking about the rules, how the rules change. He said, you know, if we had won the battle and rules of war were followed, who would own that Custer battlefield? We would. You're supposed to own the territory that you occupy or that you take by conquest. He said that Custer battlefield should be Cheyenne land, but it's not. He says it's owned by the federal government. He's the government that we defeated. And then they tell the story about when the U.S. flag went down on the battlefield, the Cheyenne picked it up. And he said when the Cheyenne picked up the U.S. flag on the Custer battlefield, we counted coup on it. And that means it's ours. It belongs to us. But his thinking was always so far out there, way ahead of his time, and I used to sit there and trying to figure it out, you know. But he was the one that really pushed this like global thinking, and then now you look at this whole, you know, the global warming issue, which is a huge issue that we're trying to address too, looking at the coal mining that's going on down there, and the new coal mine that'll open up on Otter Creek, and if Schweitzer's deal goes through up on top there. You know, global warming is a reality. I think we're seeing it, and I think it's going to be like our generation and our children's generation's, you know, biggest issue to confront. So we have to work on an international environment. And, you know, you look at ocean law. I took ocean law when I was in law school. I was really fortunate to have amazing professors. I took ocean law. I was able to take pollution control law. But they look at the environment in a global way, and that's what they teach you. And that's what we have to do as global citizens, is we have to look at what's the impact, you know, to the world, that what we're doing here in Montana, and be in tune with that. You know, we have Indians that are traveling all the time to like the international courts, Geneva, trying to get our voices heard, because we're nation states. We really are. But, you know, we need to continue that whole movement on the international arena. Thank you very much.